What's going on, everybody? It's your boy KRYPTONIAN saying here, bringing you guys another Chainsaw Man chapter review for chapter 117. And now that chapter 117 is done in the books, do we have a lot to discuss, because Fujimoto just decided to leave us with the biggest cliffhanger that we've had in Chainsaw Man for a while now, because our boy Denji's fate is up in the air right now. Yoru is trying to make him into a weapon, and unlike Thor when he tried to kill Thanos for the first time, Yoru didn't make the mistake of not going for the head, because she placed her hand right on top of this man's head and said Denji's spinal cord sword. Those 4 words are going to leave the entire fandom on pins and needles for the next week. With the initial shock out of the way, let's back things up a little bit and dive into the chapter review itself. So the chapter opens up where the last one left off, where Denji's taking the moment to realize that he looks like a bit of a simp by just blindly obeying Mitaka, and he curses himself for mindlessly obeying Mitaka. And as he struggles with this inner horny to claim whatever request that he has that Mitaka has to comply with, Denji sees the one thing he's always wanted to see. He sees a penguin, and that's our first sign that this chapter is going to rip our hearts out, because he finally gets to see his wish of seeing a penguin up close and personal, and he even gets to hold a penguin, because all of a sudden the entire aquarium is gone and they're back standing in the middle of the street. You see Denji getting all attached, she's smiling ear to ear because he's holding the penguin. However, that's where we see the darker turn come into play here. Mitaka's shown holding the aquarium sword, and she's battling the Eternity Devil that was working for the Famine Devil, and the Eternity Devil shouting that that's not enough to buy the aquarium and that this wasn't part of the deal that it made with the Famine Devil, which lets us know right away that there's an even larger endgame at play here. Just before Mitaka gets crushed by the Eternity Devil, Yoshida steps in, super overconfident as he always is, and he's wrecking havoc. He's got the fight under control, and he even tells the devil that the sky looks a lot nicer to him now, because he knows how to cherish these things more now that he's out that aquarium, which means that Yoshida was legitimately at peace with dying when he spoke to Denji last, which means we got to start putting death flags for Yoshida in part 2. However, as Mitaka has her eyes closed, Yoru takes back over, and that's where things really start to get out of hand here. After Yoru mocks Mitaka for her guilt in making a weapon out of the aquarium, Yoru immediately starts flexing her power. She's spinning that spear like it's nothing, and in one throw of the spear, she destroys the devil in a panel that's too gruesome for me to show given YouTube's new rules on violence in videos. In the aftermath of this, we see Yoru smiling as the blood's raining down around her, and while everyone is shocked, we see the class president has seemingly put 2 and 2 together, saying that Mitaka's power is, but we never see him finish his thought. Meanwhile, Denji is out here hugging the penguin so hard that at this point, I'm sure he's already given the penguin a name. Only Denji could be so pure and innocent while all this chaos is going on in the background. Meanwhile, we have foreshadowing, because we see Yoshida looking up at Fami, and that eye contact is screaming that Yoshida just told Fami, yo, you're on notice right now. While the penguin is taken back to one of the workers, we see Denji being the gentleman that he is and walking Mitaka back home, and we see more of their awkward conversation take place. For a short moment, you're thinking Denji has no riz, but this man finally lets his balls drop, and he asks Mitaka out on a date, and he's taking the lead here, and he's telling her that this time he'll show her how to have a real date, an awesome date, because he suddenly got all this experience, which we all know is cap. And when Mitaka smiles that smile of hers, that's when the heartbreak happens. Yoru steps in, and she says that Mitaka's in love, and she knows it because their brains are connected. And when Mitaka starts blushing, it leads to Yoru taking over, telling Mitaka they can proceed with their plan to turn Denji into a weapon. What makes the next scene so brutal is that Denji is being patted on the head just like a dog. In the opening chapter, he said that he was going to stop being blindly obedient to people just like a dog is, but at the end of the chapter, he's back being treated like a dog with a pat on the head by someone who views him like so many others did in part 1, where he's not a person, he's an object, he's a tool, he's a dog to be used for their purposes. He's viewed as less than human. Now, obviously, I don't think Denji gets turned into a weapon here, or at least I'm hoping not, but if he does, Fujimoto is going to step into some very rare company if he has the balls to kill out the previous main character to the part 1 of the story. Similar to how Dragon Ball, even then, it waited at least 140 chapters before Piccolo killed Raditz and Goku. Chainsaw Man's only at 117 chapters. Just food for thought. On one hand, I love that Mitaka's character, as we continue to chart her growth from chapter 1 of part 2 of the manga all up until now, has continued to grow. For me personally, it was hard for me to envision envision her as someone who could actually feel love for another person in the way that Yoru was implying that Mitaka was feeling for Denji because of how she initially came off. But now we've seen her come to this point only to watch Denji potentially be turned into a weapon right in front of her very eyes. Oh man, even if this fails, the damage is done here on so many different levels. Guilt from what she just led Denji into, and potentially Yoru realizing that she can't turn Denji into a weapon because there's something special about him, and she might actually be thinking back to Denji saying that he's the Chainsaw Man. This Chainsaw Man Part 2 rom-com that we've been getting the last couple of chapters between Denji and Mitaka, it looks like it's not going to end very well. Fujimoto literally came in here and said, this is why you can't have nice things. Like in the last chapter, Denji went as far as to say, you remind me of a friend, clearly talking about power. And there are moments where when the two are running around and they're looking at each other, I got vibes of Reze from Part 1. And you can tell that there was definitely something there being built between Mitaka and Denji. In the literal next chapter, Fujimoto just burst through the door and asked all of us if we forgot who he was. This man was not going to write a happy ending like that, and it pains me to even say that because I want Denji to be happy. I got attached to him in Part 1 of the story. What's also interesting about this chapter is that the Eternity Devil coming back in Part 2, and though the appearance itself was brief, I kind of like this time around better than I actually liked the first time around. Sure, last time you had that super chaotic battle, you had people turning on each other, you had that famous Kobine freak out moment, but this time around the atmosphere just felt different. Maybe it's because I knew what to expect as a reader from the Eternity Devil, while also at the same time knowing that Fujimoto likes to subvert our expectations on the drop of a hat. The other thing about this chapter is that there's a clear setup between Yoshida and Famine going on here. This kind of feels like the early stages where Yoshida is catching on to Fami in the same way that Kishibe likely caught on to Makima early on off screen. There wasn't anything said between the two, but the glances are there, and this means either Yoshida is on the right side of this battle and it's going to be facing Fami towards the end of Part 2 of Chainsaw Man, or Fami is going to have this man removed out the equation when the time is right, especially when she learns the connection to Denji. There's something going on with these two horsewomen, Fami and Yoru, something we have to keep our eyes on, because just when you think you have them figured out, they do something completely out of left field that throws you all the way for a loop. Yoru is 1 minute shocked that Mitaka made a weapon this strong out the aquarium, but then she's like, yep, aquarium spirit, that sounds lame, it looks lame, it feels lame, and she tosses it aside like it's nothing, which either means that the weapons are only good for one time, which I believe is the case, or she gauged the power and said, nope, this ain't strong enough to kill Chainsaw Man, can't use it. However, here's the thing, even if that was the case, it's still a really strong weapon to add to the arsenal to be used later on. Yoshida clearly was about to win the fight against the Eternity Devil. It almost felt as if it was the bratty and impatient side of Yoru coming out here, where Yoru was like, yo, that's cool, but it's time for me to flex. I really wish we would have seen more of a thought process there, but it's in character for Yoru to act the way she did. Now, Isayumi's line feels like it could be leading to something, the class president. The man clearly saw the power up that took place between Mitaka and Yoru switching control, and the man was like, wait a second, this looks different. Now, personally, I'm still hoping he gets turned into a weapon because I do not like him. I do not like him at all. And while this does give me hope that he figured out something about Mitaka that leads to Yoru turning him into a weapon, I'm not 100% sure. This feels like Fujimoto's making another red herring, like he did with the cell phone, where you think maybe Mitaka's going to make the cell phone into a weapon, like she did the uniform because of the connection it has to her mother, but nope, that was not the case. Nothing ever came of it, and I feel like this is going to be something similar here. However, that leads us all the way back to the plot twist of the chapter. There's a chance that nothing truly comes of Yoru trying to turn Denji into a weapon. Now, allow me to explain here. So yes, Denji, he's in a dire situation. There's no getting around that. This could turn out to be something bad. However, due to Denji having Pochita in his heart, this might actually save him because number one, he's a devil-human hybrid, and number two, the Chainsaw Devil likely cannot be turned into a weapon, because think about it, if it could, Yoru would have just done so during all the other battles with Pochita in the past, because Pochita was killed in the past, because Pochita's been alive in hell and he's been alive on earth, so he's been killed before, so Yoru would have already done it. But so far, we've got no inclination that she's ever made a weapon out of Pochita. I think between that and Denji's promise to find the Blood Devil to befriend it, and how Part 2 has been reintroducing devils from Part 1, I think it's safe to say that that plot point, it isn't going to go unaddressed at any point. And then there's the whole thing about Nayuta still being out there. Now, she could just be a ticking time bomb waiting to go off. However, I'm going to say this. The beginning of this chapter had me going back and looking over every panel in the chapter, looking for some sign of a bird or an insect or an animal, something that Nayuta could be controlling, and watching things play out, because when I finished looking at all the panels and didn't see anything besides that penguin that could have been controlled by Nayuta, that led to a lot of despair setting in. I think Fujimoto might actually be crazy enough to kill Denji off, which, wow, if he does, that's going to break my heart, but that will put Chainsaw Man in the top 5 of my favorite manga. Now, that being said, I'm curious to know you guys' thoughts, because this clearly is something that Fujimoto wants to do, which is to get the audience invested and say what's going to happen in Denji. So my chapter question to you guys is, do you think Yoru's going to be able to make Denji into a weapon, or is she destined to fail? While you think that over, click here to watch these other Chainsaw Man videos. You're still on the screen right now.